Please welcome our guest speaker, Mark Butcher. Mark is an advanced driving trainer and is the owner, director of Performance Driving Australia. Thank you, Mark.
I have a great team of people, so some office staff based here, and then we have trainers based all over the countryside. Some of you local here probably know Alan Rourke. He's pretty well known around the scene. He delivers a lot of our programs here in Tassie, and we've got a really broad range of skills with our trainers. A lot of them come from motorsport backgrounds, law enforcement, security, all sorts of things, emergency services. It goes on and on. So really good bunch of people. Like me, one of the things we try and put across at all our programs is that we're not experts. We certainly make mistakes. We probably occasionally do take risks. We try and avoid that. And I guess the biggest thing with becoming a safe driver is the ability to manage yourself, identify things, take appropriate actions, to minimise the chance of yourself being involved in a crash or an incident. And that, I guess, in overall is really what we try to do as a business. So I guess that's who I am. I've done all sorts of things over the years, worked underground. I'm also a commercial pilot by trade and worked in that industry, still have a big passion for that. And I've raced in cars right up to world championship level in rallying. So as I said, though, it doesn't make me any better than anyone else. Still make mistakes, still drinking coffee while I'm driving. So I don't pretend to be an expert. But what I try to do is get people to understand that, you know, it's actually not hard to become a better driver just by changing the way we do things. So that's what today's about. The things I'm going to talk about over the next sort of half an hour, 40 minutes are things like some of the main issues we see here in Tasmania, give you some tips on the vehicle, just making sure that that's okay. Some driving tips, of course, so that when you're behind the wheel, you know, you can make some good decisions that might help you avoid being involved in an interaction with something or somebody. Talk about motivation and decision making, and the main thing I'm going to try and do is not be boring. A lot of these talks about road safety talk about the same stuff, and I can harp on about wearing your seatbelt and don't drink drive and fatigue and all those things, and you've all been hammered about that. So I'm going to try and not get tied up into those things and try and give you some like little niche pieces that will actually be takeaways for you, so that you can actually go, hey, I actually learned something. I didn't just hear the same. If I do waffle on, just, you know, put your hand up or something and interrupt me, that'd be fine. This is about you guys really getting as much as you can out of this time. It's an investment of your time. We want to make sure that you do pick some things up. So questions are welcome. As we get sort of rolling, feel free to either type them in or just speak up if you like. There's enough of us here that there's not too many. We can certainly answer them as we go. So that's a bit of an intro. I guess we're going to just kick off with what are the common issues that we see on our roads in Tasmania. And I guess the pet hates, and I'm sure everyone's going to agree with me here, overtaking lanes, the ability for people to actually hit walk factor when they're in the left lane at the overtaking lane. They've been previously sitting on 80, 90 k's an hour forever, and all of a sudden they get to an overtaking lane and they've gone like a bat out of hell. So I think a pretty common pet hate and just a weird characteristic of some of our roads. Merging, again, similar to that, can be a bit of an issue. We don't have a lot of merging in Tasmania, but I see some really strange behaviours around those things. Tailgating, another one which I was actually literally driving the kids to school the other day. Someone was so close behind me, it reminded me of when we were shooting a TV commercial and the camera car was like a foot from behind me. And this is just someone driving to school. So it's, you know, we see some really crazy behaviours on our roads, and that's just the tip of the iceberg, really. But I guess just having a quick look at those, what can we do about them? Well, the overtaking thing is interesting because Tassie roads are predominantly single lane, as you're all well aware. When we get to an overtaking lane, I think some people think because the road's now wider, it's safer and they can actually go faster. It's frustrating, but there's actually no gain in getting past them, because what you're going to find, because our roads are predominantly single lane, is even if you speed up to get past them and you're now doing 120 or whatever it is to get past them and they're flying alongside you, you get in front of them only to catch up to the next slow vehicle that's in front of you, because we're back to single lanes. We're not dual carriageway roads where you're going to gain anything, because the traffic doesn't flow any faster than the slowest vehicle. And what you find is in Tassie, you just kind of leapfrog, and you see people do it. I'm sure that if you're observing, you'll see people overtake 5 cars and you're just going to see them again 5 minutes later. And it's definitely more evident here in Tassie because the design and nature of our roads. Whereas, you know, in Melbourne or, you know, on the mainland where you've got 3 or 4 lanes, you can overtake people and generally there's a clear lane. If someone is moving slower, you can safely get past them. Here, you're just going to catch up to the next car and not gain anything. So what you can do is realistically just kind of tune out a bit, just try and drive your own race effectively, like give a bit of a gap, don't speed up, just do what you can. And this is going to be a common theme through what I talk about, particularly with driving today, is that it's that mindset or attitude of, you know, do we really need to do that? Do I need to be in a rush? Do I have to go this fast? You probably find the answer in most cases is there's no gain in it, there's no benefit, the risks are increased, and you definitely don't get anywhere any faster, especially not here. So your best bet is just to try and take a deep breath. The other strategies I try and apply with driving on our roads is just time management. So in other words, drive to work 10 minutes earlier or 10 minutes later, or start early, start late, finish early, finish late. If you can do those things, you quite often avoid the big rushes of traffic, which cause some of these issues. So if you're somebody who feels like you get anxiety from being stuck in traffic and you want to overtake everyone, you probably need to just change when you leave, or perhaps even the roads that you take. Take the scenic drive. You might find that's less frustrating. It might take you a bit longer, but that's still better than sitting in traffic. So there are options available to you. A lot of people just get into the grind of leave 8:15 every morning, sit in traffic for half an hour and find themselves really not gaining very much except a bit of a headache and frustration before they've even walked into the door at work. So they're the sort of things that having a bit of a think about the bigger picture might help you out. The merging thing, again, I let people in because most people here don't really know often what to do when it comes to merging, and you don't want to find yourself side by side. And I've had that happen a lot. And then you've got an awkward situation, particularly coming on to obviously the Bass Highway, where there's quite a bit more merging, I think, than anywhere else. You find that you end up side by side, they speed up, slow down, they don't really know what you're doing. So just make it really clear what you're doing. In other words, slow down enough that they get miles in front and they can go, or speed up enough that you're miles in front. Don't try and merge like a zip merge as much as, you know, the adverts say that's how to do it. You're going to find that you're just going to end up with this weird situation where you could end up side by side, and that can cause, you know, again, potentially a dangerous situation as the road runs out. So merging, tailgating is another one of those things where I've sped up, slowed down, I've tried everything to let people go past, and they continue to sit basically right up your backside. There is a passive technique we use. We probably shouldn't encourage it too much, but a lot of people in the old days would be like, slam on the brakes. Please don't do that. That's definitely not a encouraged method, but feel free to clean your windscreen because we do find the water goes over the roof and lands on their windscreen. A couple of benefits of that. One is all of a sudden as the water lands on their windscreen, you'll notice they'll clean their windscreen. So maybe now they can see you and realize they're tailgating, and all of a sudden you've helped everybody out. But you also find that after people do that, they actually tend to move back. It's just a passive thing where people just go, oh, that's annoying, and actually leave a bit of a gap. So that's about the only thing you can do. Besides that, again, focus on what you're doing, leave a reasonably big gap in front of you, because if you have to brake, and for example, the one common thing I see in Tassie is animals on the road, whether they be alive or not. And you sometimes have to take some evasive action. You got somebody right behind you that's going to impact your ability to negotiate that. So eyes up, leave a gap, and hopefully they go past you. But I will say in most cases that I've had tailgaters, they really don't want to get past. They're just in a habit of driving super close to you. All of these things we can reverse around. And of course, we're going to pinpoint everyone that's not in the room today, but you know, I'm sure that we've all done it as well. So I've even been in a situation where I'm following someone and thinking, well, I am actually really close to that car, and the penny drops and you realize I'm now one of these tailgaters. So, you know, part of this is recognizing other people. The first part, of course, is not doing it yourself. So try and leave a big gap. And we teach 2 to 3 second gaps. And if any of you try that on the way home tonight, you'll realize that's a huge gap and 10 cars will pull in front of you. So it's just managing that gap relevant to the conditions and the speed that you're traveling. But ideally, don't be any closer than you need to be to any other car. It's just going to buy you time, and time is your best friend if something was to go wrong. So then I guess some of the pet hates we see. We also have road conditions here that change, extremely from one condition to the other. I think most of you might have seen that rollover that happened near Woolworths last night in Prospect. That there's thousands of crashes every day, not every day, thankfully, but there's thousands of crashes every month in our roads in Tassie. And a lot of them just seem, how did you get there? Like, honestly, it's inexplainable. They're busy roads, they're well-maintained roads, they're often low-speed roads, and there's a car upside down. It just comes about by people not allowing for the conditions and not allowing for other people. So really being a defensive driver is all about taking your time, not rushing and really reading what's happening. It's like, I see cars coming out into a roundabout who I know are not going to give way. Just slow down way before the roundabout. Don't rush up to the roundabout and then stop, because you're going to cause a backlog right through the traffic behind you as well. So managing that as well as you can. When the roads are wet and it hasn't rained for a while, they are extremely slippery here in Tassie. And I will talk about this a little bit later on, but I think we have some of the worst vehicles on our roads. And some people get upset about that, but we don't have annual inspections, and we don't, we see some vehicles that really shouldn't be on our roads. And that means they're going to be leaking oil, diesel, whatever else. And that contaminates our road surface, which of course, when it rains, comes to the surface, becomes an ice rink. So the initial rain, always go really steady and slowly. It doesn't matter how good a driver you are, when you hit oil on a wet road, you're gone. It doesn't matter. You could have all the skills in the world, you're still going to slide off the road. So you must slow down, particularly before any corners or any braking areas, just way before you get there. Because where the braking is, or where the cornering is actually where the vehicles drop the oil, because that's when your vehicle changes its state effectively. There's under brakes, the car sort of deaccelerates, all the oil is going to drop off. Going around a corner, all the oil is going to drop off. So the secret there is slow down before you get to those points and then roll through those areas. You aren't going to slide off the road. Any of us that have been driving in Tasmania for a long time have probably had our moments where we've hit slippery patches, whether it's rain, excessive water on the road. So, aquaplaning, it's pretty common in Tassie. And then you got ice, snow, all those cold conditions. You got reduced visibility from fog. We're coming into that season now where we're going to see a lot more fog on our roads. I was in New South Wales last week and there was a torrential downpour. I just stopped, and a lot of people were still driving. And I'm thinking, I'm a fairly experienced driver and I didn't feel comfortable driving at 80 k's an hour on a road where I couldn't see my bonnet. And there's people going past me like there's no tomorrow. And the biggest fear for me was I wanted to make sure I pulled well off the road, because I didn't want to get rear-ended by someone doing 80 k's an hour, because they just think I'm on the road and follow me off the road. So make sure if you do pull out of the way, get well out of the way. Think about where you stop, because that can be a big problem. Again, a Tassie thing with our single lane roads. If you have a problem, get well off the road. I attended a pretty serious accident about 4 or 5 years ago, and the car had run out of fuel and then was hit by another car on the Bass Highway. Some pretty graphic sort of thing to come across when another car hits another car that's stationary. There's a lot of forces involved there, and both drivers not particularly at fault, just not expecting it to happen. So making sure that if you do have to stop, get well off the road. Gravel roads, we have plenty of those too. We have all sorts of road conditions here. It comes down to just driving at your pace. Remember, when you get behind the wheel of a car, your objective is to get to the other location in one piece, with the car in one piece, without causing any, issues to other people. So making sure that you drive not only defensively, but also in a respectful way that allows for other people. We've got everything on our roads, from big B doubles to pretty much mopeds, tiny motorbikes and things like that. So and on top of that, farm trucks, you know, agricultural equipment. I'm always surprised when you're driving on these roads and you see some huge harvester driving down the road. You don't want to meet that coming the wrong way when you're going a bit fast and go over the white line. That's the sort of thing that's going to be a no argument type situation. So, you know, we have to allow for these conditions at all times. There's the unexpected things that are probably going to catch most drivers out. The crashes, you know, we see a lot of crashes on our road, and I'm surprised, to be honest, that our road toll is probably not higher than it is. When you see some of the crashes that have occurred on our roads in the last 12 months, and people have either got away with minor injuries or no injuries, is actually amazing. Our cars are safer, so that's doing a good job. But I feel like we're very lucky that it's not worse than it is. And I think we need to be very mindful that we need to avoid crashes at all costs. And it just comes down to, again, driving according to, you know, the conditions, but just removing that element of time out of things. Like, give yourself time, be patient, and find that you'll hopefully find that you'll, you know, your driving will become more relaxed and you'll observe a lot more things, and that will give you more time to make good decisions. The incident the other day up here with the truck was a horrific situation, and a great example of why just looking out the window when you're driving and not paying attention to anything can be quite dangerous, because things do happen, and that was a very unexpected situation for everybody to have a truck cross over the road. It is not far from where I live, and you know, it's just one of those things where if you're switched on, paying attention, you've got a little bit more chance of taking some evasive action. Whereas if you're driving in a big bunch of cars, door to door, the music cranked, yelling at the kids, whatever else, the dog's on your lap, like I've seen all these things happening, you're not going to be able to respond to a situation like that. So, you know, buy yourself some tickets in the right competition by putting yourself in a scenario where you can best respond or react to things. When we do tactical driving, it's all about strategies. It's all about what ifs. And realistically, it's one thing we don't really teach young drivers, is that, you know, we do go, oh, what happens if a car runs the red light? And people are like, oh, okay, I'd stop and whatever else. But we should be constantly thinking about what if situations when we're driving. If there's another car on the road, or a pedestrian on the side of the road, or an animal, we already should have a plan in place to manage that scenario. If we do, we're going to respond quicker, better, and it's going to be a better outcome for everyone. And it's something that most of us learned through experience, but good training and an understanding of those things can certainly help as well. Just on the animals, a little bit of a Tassie tip here is, if one does jump out in front of you, particularly if it's a wallaby or something like that, stay on the road, brake heavily as you can, because you don't want to hit the animal, because it's going to damage your vehicle. It's not great for the animal. And if you get down to sort of 30, 40 Ks an hour, you can do a little bit of a evasive maneuver. And if you're going to, generally the rule is to aim for the tail, because they don't hop backwards, if anyone's not noticed that. So if a wallaby jumps out, you brake and you move towards the tail of the animal, you got more chance of missing it. Do not leave the road though, like stay on the road, and obviously be aware again of oncoming traffic, things like that. It can get pretty dicey with animals. The other day I had a big one run straight in front of me, and I was too busy talking about that, and a second one came straight through and nearly cleaned me up. So again, with all the experience in the world, and I was so excited to say, hey, I missed that one, I forgot that there's another one right behind. So it's really hard to train for that, but again, being alert, at least it's going to give you the best chance to respond. And I did mention the Tassie vehicle conditions. Like, I'm horrified when I drive through town and pull up at the lights and I have a look at the cars around me. I've seen very expensive cars with tyres that have got no tread on them at all. It doesn't matter how good your car is. If you don't have good tyres on our roads, you're going to be at a major disadvantage. So one of the biggest things I can suggest, even if you've got a crappy old car, just put some good tyres on it, because our roads are very unforgiving. They're quite often slippery. There's often wet, and that tread depth, so the amount of height you've got between the rubber and the tyre, the tread on the tyre, is the main thing that's going to give you some bite when you have to do something. But I honestly am embarrassed to see some people's cars are literally like smooth tyres. I laughed the other day because I've seen one pretty nice car, and they had a dash cam. And I thought, and the tyres were bold. I was like, I'm confused here because they've spent money on a dash cam so they can record everyone else's bad driving, and they're getting around with bold tyres. Like, sell the dash cam, buy some tyres, and you probably won't have to record your own accident. So, it's funny the mindset of people, like they'll spend money on things that don't really help. They want to blame everyone else, which is a pretty common thing these days. But definitely tyres, huge, important part of staying safe. So no matter what your car is, maybe today when you go out, have a walk around, have a look at your tyres. I'll talk a little bit more about them in a minute, but they are critical. And the amount of cars I see with really bad tyres in Tassie is pretty bad. And we should really be stopping and checking those things. That's something that we could do to improve, some of these incidents will prevent some of them from happening. So that's, I guess, a little bit of a Tassie scene, right? When it comes to checking your vehicle, there's a lot of questions there about what I should check and how often. And I think, again, it's one of those issues where even myself, I don't check things as much as I should. But what I do is a couple of things which I think are easy to adopt. And this is what I think I try and encourage people to do, which is, first of all, if you think about your car as a bit of safety equipment, you wouldn't wear boots with holes in them or gloves with holes in them, or your pants with holes in them. So, you take time enough to check those things, but yet we get into the car without usually checking it at all. So if nothing else, I just have a walk around the vehicle. So before you get in the driver's seat, go the long way, walk around the car and just go, oh, look, the tyres all look like they've got air in them. There's nothing weird happening. And then when you get in the car, you've already got one step ahead of most people. They don't even do that. They literally get in the car, and if someone had stolen the passenger side tyres, they wouldn't know until they drove off. So really good idea. Have a quick walk around. Ideally, once a week, try and pop the bonnet, have a quick look under there. I don't know if any of you live in like rural areas or farming areas, but if you do, rats, mice, snakes, all those things can move in if your car's parked in a nice place with a bit of sun or some warmth for a while. They all like to move in. So a good check under there. And when we do our courses here in Tassie, the amount of times we open bonnets and do find a nest of something is quite surprising. And they're often fleet vehicles where no one's even checked under the bonnet. So could be a brand new car and it could still have those issues. So definitely have a quick check under the bonnet. Oil and water and those sort of things. If it's a new car, you can probably just have a quick visual inspection, shut the bonnet, and happy days. But some of the things that I've noticed too, and I've had it happen a couple of times since I've just moved into a more rural area, is spiders in the car. No one wants to talk about that, but I can tell you now that they're not fun if they're in the car or outside the car. And I've had some pretty big ones just appear down the windscreen and the kids are screaming and it's quite a big distraction. And I've had a couple inside the car where I left the sunroof open one day. I'm never going to do that again. So a couple of tips there. Maybe when you check your car, also check inside it to make sure nothing is in there that might surprise you while you're driving. And I am sure that statistically there have been some crashes because somebody had a spider land on their lap while they were driving. So on a serious note, if you're not sure, give it a bit of a spray, do something. They don't like lemon. I don't know if you know this, or citrus. So that's always a good way to get rid of them. You often see on your mirrors, there's lots of spider webs. Well, that generally means they might be living in there. So a bit of citrus around the edge of the mirrors sometimes keeps them away. So, little pointers like that might, you won't do it. I promise you, none of you will do it until you have a spider. And then you'll be like, oh, I should have done that. And you might do it again. But just keep an eye out for things like that. Big distractions while you're driving. Things like loose items in the objects is another Tassie thing. People go and buy a Commodore Ute or a wagon. And I won't pick on any particular industry, but you see some particular ones where it is loaded to the roof and the passenger seat full of stuff. If there was an accident, they would struggle to find the driver because the amount of shit that basically would fly forward would make them disappear and probably change color. So not giving away too much. But the point here is that, any loose items in your car need to be behind a barrier, need to be secured down. And it's no different to, I see people doing the school run with their kids and they have, 2 weeks worth of Macca's toys and other bits and pieces flying around as well. They're distractions. They can end up under the pedals. They become missiles in an accident. you know, not to pick on things too much, but that accident last night, the rollover, you could see the amount of stuff on the ground that had come out of the car. Now, there's just another example of that stuff flying around in the car. It's going to come out of the car in an accident, and it may or may not be via collecting you on the way through. So making sure, remove any loose items. Those of you who've got roof racks or tow things, make sure no overhanging loads. Make sure you're not exceeding the weight limits. Make sure you tie things down. And I'm sure if we went around the room and asked who's lost something off the back of a trailer or the back of a ute, most of us at some stage have. Even though you've tied it down and gone, yep, that's not going anywhere, it's never enough. And I've learned this the hard way a few times. So make sure, put the extra ratchet strap on, double check, stop as the moment you think something's moving or whatever, pull over and check. Because something flying off a car can cause an accident. We know we had that horrible accident on the Midlands Highway with the caravan that lost I think it was a solar panel off the roof. You know, what seems like a fairly innocent situation can quickly become quite nasty if someone then swerves to miss it and causes a crash. So if you are carrying items in a tray, in a trailer, in a roof rack, make sure it's properly secured, tied down. Again, I've seen some stuff in Tassie, which is just, if I wasn't driving, I'd love to take a photo of, because you wouldn't believe it if you didn't see it. And the most recent one was someone towing a vehicle on a car trailer, and it wasn't tied on at all. It was literally just parked on the trailer. And I'm just thinking, they were doing 100 down the Midlands Highway. If they hit the brakes, that car was just going to go straight off the trailer into the back of their other car. It does make you wonder what people think, but I guess really, if you think about it, as a learner driver, we're not taught how to tow trailers or how to tie things down. So there's no license for that. And the next thing is you get a job somewhere and you're doing that, and your employer just assumes you know how to do it. And all of a sudden you've got all these big issues occurring. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Google, YouTube, whatever it is, get the information that you need, but tie it down, no loose objects, don't overload things. That's all going to make a big difference to your safety. Understanding the safety systems of your car, lane keep assist, active cruise control. You know, a lot of your cars now, when you brake heavily, the hazard lights flash and the brake lights also flash, which is a super cool feature. They also, a lot of new cars now also tighten the seatbelt pre-crash and also put the windows up and do a whole heap of other things. So just familiarize yourself with the safety features. And I always suggest to people, when you're buying a car, get the salesperson to explain them. Don't just go, oh, I bought a cool car and I love the color. You know, find out about the safety features, what they are, how they work, because that may be useful information, because if you are having an accident, they're the things that are either going to prevent it, reduce it, or hopefully save your life if it all goes a bit bad. Electric cars is just another topic that we sort of want to touch on. And I think over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see a lot more of them. And we need to understand the differences between those and our conventional vehicles. They are a little bit heavier, obviously quiet, but I don't know if anyone's been around them much. They do play a bit of music when they're driving down the road. It's ever so vague, but they do make a sound. So, you know, we need to adapt to that, particularly if we're pedestrians. But they're certainly a different experience to drive. They're very talky, very responsive. And I think that when we do start driving them more, we do need to adapt our driving a little bit more. Again, mostly because of the weight, but also because they are responsive. And in fact, not that I'm one to ever complain about the performance of vehicles, but a bulk standard electric car is going to be a lot quicker than what most people are used to driving now. So in the next 5 or 10 years, we're going to have people getting around in cars that are as quick as sports cars of 2 years ago. And that is a little bit of a concern to me, because I think people love to put their foot down, but they're not expecting it to take off. This could be a problem. So, you know, getting a feel for your car, learning it, respecting it. A lot of them have really clever regeneration on them, so that you can almost drive with one foot. When you lift your foot off, it actually brakes for you. Again, if you are buying an electric car, take the time to learn it. You know, just do some research, because we're not used to that. And I guess if you look around, you know, a group like today, that's a bit like us and manual vehicles, because no one knows how to drive those anymore. And if you drive full drives, no one knows how to lock hubs before. Like, that stuff's just gone. And electric cars for our new generation, they'll be just like, oh yeah, that's how they drive, just with one pedal. But then they'll get into your car and have a huge crash because they realize when they take their foot off, it doesn't slow down. So understanding that little change, we're in a situation where we're in a transition to that technology. And a lot of those other safety features are still in that growing stage as well. I'll just have a quick chat. I just promised to chat about tyres very quickly. A really quick way to explain how much air to put in your tyre. There is a placard that will tell you somewhere on the vehicle, but a simple observation, if you look at the side of the tyre, the side profile at the top and the bottom should look the same. If it's bulging at the bottom, 100% it does not have enough air in it. So have a walk around. If your tyres look like they're bulging, they definitely need air. Around sort of 36 to 40 pounds per square inch is generally what we recommend for most cars. And I'll just give you a really simple way to remember why it's important to have air in your tyres. If you've ever ridden a push bike with flat tyres, you'll know straight away it's hard work, hard to pedal, more likely to damage the rim and the tyre because the tyre is bending and flexing and hitting the rim. Because if you overinflate your push bike tyre, it's just a hard ride, but the tyre actually is working quite well and it will absorb most of the impacts and let the suspension do its job. Your car is exactly the same. It's almost better to have too much air. Well, it is better to have too much air than not enough air. So a lot of people freak out when we tell them to go to 36 or 40 pounds and they think, oh, it's too high, but it's still perfectly safe. So slightly higher if possible. And the other thing is it's weight driven. So if you've got a ute and you've got nothing in the back, then maybe 32 or 36 pounds is fine. You put a 500 kilogram weight in the back, it's going to look like it's bulging at the bottom and not enough air because that air is what's holding the tyre up. So remember, weight and weight's directly related to the amount of air pressure you need to run, but too high is also better than too low. You're going to find that that's going to make a big difference to the way your vehicle handles. So when you do walk around your vehicle today before you drive home, if they do look like they're a bit bulgy, zip down to the servo. Make sure you use one with a good gauge or buy a gauge because some of the servos, I've seen people pumping in and they think they've got 80 pounds. It's not 80 pounds. The gauge is just no good. So they give you the air for free, but spend the $15 on the tyre pressure gauge so you know how much of it you've actually got. And I guess just finally, just to wrap up with some driving tips to I guess, reflect on what we've just talked about before I'm going to ask some questions. The things like defensive driving is all about protecting yourself. You know, the best driver in the world can still get rear-ended or T-boned. So it's all about that situational awareness, concentrating, removing distractions like your phone, your radio, your kids. You can't remove them, but at least, you know, manage those situations the best you can. You know, in all seriousness, if you do have young ones and they're screaming, stop and deal with it. Don't keep driving. It's a horrible distraction and the you know, could lead to the worst possible outcome. So make sure, you know, you treat those things properly. Stop, take action and manage things. There's no rush. Everyone rushes on our roads. And I think our biggest problem is people speeding around. And you see it everywhere. I always joke about the supermarket's a great way to see how people drive cars because people push their trolley up and down the lanes. Now, some of them stick to the left. Some of them go wherever they like. Some of them just stop and don't care and just walk away from their trolleys. And then you get to the counter. And if you arrive at the same time as someone else, you know, generally just let the other person go. And it's like, you know, how much of a rush are we really in that we need to fight over who's going to be through the checkout first? I think our society has just driven so much pressure into us on a day-to-day basis with work and performance and all these other things that it overflows into our driving behaviour. So if we can remove that, become more calm, more relaxed, leave a little bit earlier, enjoy your drive. I often try and stop for a coffee when I'm driving somewhere in the morning. And I'm not a morning person, but I just find leaving early, stopping, having a coffee makes up for the fact I had to leave early. And it's just a more relaxed and a safer drive because you're just not under that time pressure of being somewhere. You know, mobile phones, all those things we talked about. Fatigue is a big one. Make sure you get plenty of sleep. If you feel crappy, just don't drive. I see people driving around with eye patches on. I see people driving around with broken legs. you're not going to respond very well on those. And people go, oh, I've got no choice. Well, just think about if you had an accident and you got further injured, or your child or someone else in the car got injured, would you really think that was a good excuse? Would someone look at you and go, yeah, you probably shouldn't be driving? Would you agree with them? So assess yourself and go, really, I feel like crap today, or, I can't see, or whatever it is. That's not a good time to get behind the wheel. They're very dangerous machines when, you're not firing on all cylinders, and that's really important. So assess yourself and stop sometimes and have a think. All of that relates to motivation. The ultimate message of this and all of our training is we just want people to get home at the end of the day safely. We all work, we all do what we've got to do. Some of us have jobs that maybe might be quite dangerous, working with explosives or chemicals or underground or at elevated heights or whatever else it is. But the key thing is we often take a lot of safety in all those environments and then jump in the car and tear off home and not really think much about things. You're more likely to be injured or killed on the way home in your car than you are in probably any of those other environments. So just step back and remember, all I want to do is get home. Doesn't matter if it takes me 5 minutes longer. Doesn't matter if I'm going to miss an appointment. No one's getting paid enough to have an accident while they're driving around. And I think that's really important to remember, that ultimately, and if you want to go fast, come to one of our track days. We run plenty of them at Simmons and Basketball, but we have an ambulance standing by. We have people all going in the same direction, and you're wearing some safety gear. So there is a scope for that. But on the road, it's really about that conservative driving, taking your time, paying attention, looking ahead, and being proactive effectively in the way you drive. And then try and pass that message on to your family, your kids, your workmates. If you're with them, just say, hey, what's the rush? Let's just take it easy. My kids, it's an hour drive nearly to school for my kids now. And I just motivate them in the morning and say, look, if we leave early, we can stop and get, Macca's or do something on the way to school. It's amazing how much earlier they were happy to get up and do that. And it means I miss the traffic. It's a much more relaxed drive. They're not fighting. Whereas, in the past, it would have been everyone's up at the last minute, run around like idiots. And when you get into the car, you carry that with you. And that can cause you to make a mistake. And that mistake could lead to a pretty nasty situation. So I guess on that note, we just want to remember life is precious. You only get one of them. We are fragile creatures. We're not designed very well to have impacts or crashes. And when we get into a vehicle, that's, we're very highly exposed. You might have the safest car in the world, but this part of you isn't very strong, and you don't want to be testing it out. So I really hope that you all got a little bit out of this chat. I know I waffle on a bit, but hopefully you get some questions. Happy to answer anything that might come up. There's one question there, so I'll move into those quickly before we wrap up. The pets in the car that are not secure are illegal. You must secure your pets. I am astonished at the amount of people I see with them driving on their laps. I was at Bunnings, great place to go and see this sort of thing. And I think one person had a dog on their lap and one on their arm. I mean, okay, maybe they're in the car park, but they're probably driving out on the road the same way. And it does worry me. I love dogs. I'm here somewhere. And, but they need to be secured because for their own safety and also for your own safety. Much slower Ks as you're driving at night time. Yeah, the speed limit's an interesting thing. People think it's actually just the speed. It's not a limit. It's relevant to the conditions and lots of things. Driving at night, if there's no other traffic and it's a clear night and it's dry, the road conditions are probably pretty okay, as long as you've got good lights. And at some new cars, they're not great. As soon as those conditions deteriorate, you need to also adjust your driving. How much slower? I live up near Lilydale. I drive that road at night coming home. And if I'm in one of my nice cars that doesn't have a bar on the front of it to protect from animals, I come home at about 70 Ks an hour. And even then, still dodge animals, but most of the cases miss them, and better for me and the animal. There's no way I would drive that road at 100 at night in those cars, because I guarantee I'd be at the panel shop every second week. So, I do slow down a lot in those conditions. Obviously, if you're driving a dual cab ute and it has a bar and spotlights and there's no one else, you're probably less of a risk. But as soon as it's wet or anything like that, you just slow down. And as I said, remember that the key thing I said there, slow down before you think you need to slow down, because arriving at the braking area and braking hard is not going to help you. You want to slow down in the area before the braking area, and that means you can roll through those corners and roll through those situations with a lot more control and a lot safer. Safety track days, please. Yes, they're available to individuals and corporates. Safety track days is in our defensive driving courses, I think, maybe. We run typically 8 or more of those a month in Tasmania. We look after all of the government departments, all of the big corporates, and we welcome private individuals as well. If you go to our website, if you look for Performance Driving Australia, you'll find us. Drop us a message and we can certainly give you some info on how to attend. It's a full day program. There's theory in the morning, which is a bit of a chat, a lot of discussion, some videos, few things, nothing too much, but it's more about, again, creating. What we actually try and do is get the stories out of all the people in the room and discuss strategies to manage those things. A bit like today, it's been a bit one-sided, but same sort of thing. And then in the afternoon, you get to drive your car and learn what happens when you brake heavily and why we need to slow down, what the difference is between 80 and 100 Ks now, which is quite significant. And everyone who's done the course, and we put through thousands of people a year